Hi everyone, welcome back to Charlie's Journey. First of all, I just want to say I am absolutely gassed because since I posted my first couple of videos, just my intro video and my JW backstory, if you haven't seen those, go back and watch that. Since I filmed those two videos, I've gained a few subscribers. I didn't expect to gain any, if I'm honest, but like I said in my first video, if I can just help one person, I'm winning. And I think I'm up to 8 subscribers now, and it doesn't sound like a lot, but the type of person I am now is I see the glass as half full, not half empty. So I celebrate all my wins, no matter how small. In fact, the smaller, the more grateful I am, and I'm extremely grateful because I've had some nice comments, I've had a nice email from somebody, so thank you for everybody that's subscribed and that's supported me so far. I hope you're enjoying the videos. I've got loads more to come. And if it's the first time you're seeing me, then as I said, I'm Charlie. I post on Wednesdays and Sundays, so look out for my videos in the future. Please subscribe. So this is the video that I think a few people are waiting for, why I left the Jehovah's Witnesses. And yeah, I'm just going to get straight into it. First of all, I just want to give a disclaimer. I'm not, as much as I've left the Jehovah's Witnesses and I'm very happy that I've left, I don't want to make my videos be, I don't want my videos to be negative towards them as such, or overly negative, because like I mentioned, I think in my previous videos, there are plenty of channels that go into a lot more detail about JW doctrines and the very dark negative side of the Jehovah's Witnesses, and that's not necessarily what I'm here to do. I'm happy to answer questions, and even if in the future people have questions that I feel like I need to do videos on that does go into maybe more negative side of things, I will definitely do that. But overall, I'm trying to be supportive to those who may have left. Like I said, again, I will always say this, you do not have to be an ex-JW to gain value from my channel, but I definitely have created this for anybody that was like me at the time when I left 4 years ago, almost 4 years ago. I was looking desperately for somebody who understood and who could give me, I guess, some hints and some tips on how to navigate what was a very dark time for me. And I realized that a lot of the things that I've picked up along the last 4 years can be used for anybody who's going through a tough time, basically. So as I said, all that said, I'm not here to bash them. So I'm sitting in front of my kitchen window and somebody just walked past again. So yeah, I'm not here to bash them. I'm just here to talk my truth, my own personal truth, my own personal experience. And as I said, this is just unique to me. But of course, if anybody does have any questions about them, I can definitely do more videos going into depth about certain things, or you can email me. I'll leave my email in all the videos that I post for anybody that wants to have a bit more of a one-on-one conversation with me. I'm more than happy to do that. Right, let's get into it now. Enough interruptions. So right, first things first, one of the things that was very difficult for me throughout my JW life and experience, living my life, is Jehovah's Witnesses are a very strict religion, and when it comes to things like sin, they have very set protocols of how they deal with things like that. Now, without going into it too tough, I struggled with getting myself into trouble. Just put it that way. I struggled over the years from very early teens to early 20s with getting myself into some trouble, and that meant that I had to be disciplined by the older men called elders. If you're not familiar with the Jehovah's Witnesses, the elders who oversee all the congregations and who you know, are in charge of running things. I had to be disciplined by them a number of times, let's just put it that way, for things that I used to struggle with. And it's a very humiliating process. Yeah, It's a very, very humiliating process, because there's generally 3 of them that you have to speak to and go and confess. A bit, not like, you know how the Catholics will have confession where you can go into like a booth kind of thing, or I've never been into a Catholic church, so apologies if I'm not saying this right, but I'm just going by things I've seen on TV. They go into that little booth thing with the screen, or the, you know, the mesh screen thing, and then, you know, they look ahead of them, or they can look, I guess, at the Father and, you know, confess, I did this, I did that, but it's between them and the priest. No, it's not like that with the chosen witnesses. When you have sinned, you have to go before 3 men, and a lot of the time they're a lot older than you, a lot older. Now, bearing in mind, I was a teenager, a young teenager, when all of my my troubles started, because obviously you're a teenager, you're starting to get into stuff, and I, you know, having to sit in front of 3 grown, sometimes older, as in men in their 60s, to have to sit before them and tell them what it is you've done. And when I tell you, you have to tell them what you've done, I'm saying that you have to go into detail. They don't accept you just glossing over the details of what it is you've done. You need to go into, I believe, unnecessary detail over the things that you have done. They want to know everything. That's an extremely humiliating process, and I believe it's done that way on purpose, to try and, one, see if you are truly sorry for what you've done, but also to teach you a lesson. Because if you're humiliated enough, you should hopefully not repeat the sin. You should hopefully not do it again. But I had a struggle. I felt, I'll go into, that's part of my second reason why I left and why I struggled, shall I say. But it's I believe it's set up that way as a deterrent for people. So yeah, they have their, as I said, their way of dealing with those type of situations, and they will then judge. They'll have discussion amongst themselves after they've dismissed you. They'll ask you to leave the room. They'll have a little discussion to see whether they think that you are sufficiently sorry. They call it repentant. If you're repentant enough, they say that they pray over that situation, and they consult the scriptures to see whether they believe that you are sufficiently sorry. And if you are, then you get to remain in the congregation, and you will there'll be, I think, one of 2 outcomes. Again, I can go into all these different things, because for anybody who's never been involved with them, they might be thinking, what the hell, what do you mean? But it's almost like a court judicial system, that you are judged by these 3 individuals, and they will give you the outcome at the end of it. And hopefully it's that you get to stay in the congregation, because if you don't, then you get called what's called disfellowshipped, which means you can't speak to anybody, you can't, nobody will speak to you, and until they feel that you are, I think you have to every few months try to reapply to see if you can come back in. I'm really trying to water everything I'm saying down, because the terms and the terms that they use are going to not be familiar to anybody that's not a chosen witness, but anyone that is a chosen witness, you know what I'm talking about. But anyway, I say all that to say, I struggled. I struggled with that throughout my early teens and early 20s. And as I said, I got disciplined a number of times. And each time you get disciplined, it does something to you, especially if you are genuinely sorry. Don't get me wrong. I knew a good few people that knew how to fake being sorry, putting on the tears and saying what they knew needed to be said so that they could save themselves from being disfellowshipped. But I wasn't that type of person. I genuinely just was an imperfect human who kept making mistakes. I wasn't doing anything on purpose. And my life growing up, not to make it sound like I had a terrible life and terrible childhood, I didn't, but I had challenges. You know, my life wasn't stable, and I had a good few things happening around, like there was a lot happening with me. So there's reasons I got myself into certain situations and why I kept making these same mistakes. It wasn't because I was trying to I was trying to. I just kept I kept making mistakes, basically, as we all do. But because the Jehovah's Witnesses are such a strict religion, I had to keep suffering the consequences. And I was honest, because again, I knew people that weren't honest, that people that were sinning quite seriously, according to the Jehovah's Witnesses, and they would never confess anything. They wouldn't go to the elders and tell anybody anything. But I always felt very guilty, so I would always go and get myself disciplined. And you know, it was always, oh, Charlie, you've done it again, and oh no, have you got yourself into problems again? Yeah, I have. And that takes a toll on you over a span of time. And it started to just make me feel as though I wasn't good enough. And that's my next point. One of the reasons why I ended up leaving Jehovah's Witnesses is because I just didn't feel good enough, along with the fact that I kept making mistakes that then led me to feel as though I was not good enough. I wasn't good enough to serve God. I wasn't good enough to be part of the congregation. I wasn't good enough no matter how much I tried. And I really tried. I always feel a bit emotional when I talk about how much I tried. And then I always said in my other videos, I'm not going to cry, and I'm not going to cry. But it does make me feel sad, because I can still feel those feelings. I still feel how I used to feel. I can go back and feel those feelings. And I really did try. I really did try so hard to be a good Christian, to be a good Jehovah's Witness, and do all the things that I was supposed to. Now, why I say I didn't feel good enough, along with, as I said, making the mistakes, Jehovah's Witnesses are very strict, like I said. They're very devout individuals, so they take the Bible very seriously, and how they interpret the Bible, I'm going to say, because the way they interpret it isn't necessarily how other Christian religions interpret the Bible. So the life of a Jehovah's Witness is extremely centered around worshipping, preaching, studying the Bible, studying their publications. It's a very grueling schedule. To be a Jehovah's Witness, it's a lot. Anyone that knows, you know. If you don't know, just think it's all encompassing. And it's designed that way on purpose. It's meant to be part of your absolute everything to do with your life. And if you work on top of that, or you're in school, or anything else that is not to do with worship, it's a lot. It takes a lot on you. It puts a lot on you if you do it the way that they encourage you to do it. Now, again, don't get me wrong, there are people that can coast through and not really bothered about keeping that schedule. But again, if they're not deemed as good, what they would say, good association or exemplary Christians, or they're not seen as devout. And if you want to be seen as devout and pleasing to Jehovah, you will do all the things that they tell you that you should be doing. Like I said, the 3 meetings a week, 2 during the week, and then 1 on the weekend, as well as the weekend preaching work, or during the week preaching work. And some people sign up to be what's called pioneers. So that means they sign up to do a certain amount of hours. It used to be 90 when I was younger for a full-time pioneer, and 70 for an auxiliary, which is like part-time. I think they've lowered it now. I've heard they've lowered it to make it a little bit more manageable for people, because it's grueling to dedicate 50 or 90 or 70 hours a month preaching when you're working on top of that. Most of the time people are working, or you're going to school or whatever. It's a hell of a lot. It's a hell of a lot to keep up. And then you're supposed to be praying on a daily basis, reading your Bible on a daily basis, helping out people in the congregation that are, maybe need help or less, fortunate than you or whatever. It's a hell of a lot. And I just, especially once I had children, I just didn't feel good enough, because I had to then just like my mum did, like I mentioned in my backstory, my mum did her best, because my mum is still a Jehovah's Witness. She's still very devout, and she really did her best to try and study the Bible with me and my younger sister when we were little. And you're expected to do that as a parent. A good parent anyway would have some kind of Bible study schedule for their child. They call it family worship now. And once I had my children, I was trying my best to keep up that schedule, take them out, because again, you take them out on the preaching work with you from the time they're born, or as soon as it's safe to do so, you take them out on the preaching, the door knocking with you. So it's a lot, and we know being a parent is a hell of a lot of a thing as it is. So I just didn't feel good enough, because I was struggling, especially towards the end of my JW journey. So that's the other thing. I never felt good enough. The next thing is I suffered with depression from the age of about 16, because I was severely bullied as a kid from the age of about 10, 11 to the age of 16. One of the reasons because she wore the wrong colour in the town that she lived in at the time, but also because I was a Jehovah's Witness. So I had a double whammy. I was severely, that is a video for another day. That really is a video for another day. But I was horrifically bullied, to the point where when I got to the age of 16, the doctor said, listen, we're putting her on medication because she's not coping. But more than that, I'm writing a letter to say take her out of that school, because we don't know what's going to happen if we keep her in that school. She needs to come out. And thankfully I was in the last year of secondary school, so year 11. So I did, when the doctor said to me that I needed to be pulled out, I think that was the beginning of year 11. So I completed all the rest of my schooling, my year 11 schooling from home. And I did go on to take my GCSEs. But I had bouts of depression from that age. I think I've only needed to have medication a couple of times in my life, because most of the time it's been situational. If something really tough is happening to me that I can't cope with, then I'll suffer with depression, and it can be quite severe sometimes. But again, it's circumstantial or situational, however you want to put it. And again, that feeds into what I was just mentioning about the grueling, very full-on schedule that Jehovah's Witnesses have as part of their daily life. So anybody that has suffered with depression knows that sometimes it is the biggest battle to get yourself out of that bed. Yeah, sometimes it is the biggest battle in the world to wash, get yourself dressed, much less leaving that house. Those things can be mammoth tasks when you're suffering with depression. So, and Jehovah's Witnesses don't advise or encourage their members to go to counsellors or, seek therapy. They tell you to pray more to Jehovah. They tell you to read your Bible a bit more, or they tell you to maybe speak to an elder, or as a woman speak to another woman in the congregation, maybe an older one that might be able to, give you some encouragement. But of course, none of these people are mental health trained. They don't have experience with mental health, yeah. And sometimes you do need professional help. Yeah, sometimes you do need that. And when you pray and pray and pray and pray, but your mental health doesn't improve, but you're being told that you should be happy, or all of your not all of your worries will go away if you pray, but Jehovah will help you to feel better if you just rely on him a bit more, if you just read your Bible a bit more, if you have faith a bit more, if you think about the hope for the future, which I don't know if I mentioned before, I may not have mentioned it. Jehovah's Witnesses believe that one of their big beliefs is they believe any day now Jehovah God's going to bring Armageddon and destroy everybody who essentially, they won't tell you this, but essentially is not a Jehovah's Witness. Whoever is not a Jehovah's Witness, or who doesn't have sufficient faith in Jehovah and hasn't worshipped him acceptably enough, up until that point, will be destroyed. And he'll make way for a paradise on the earth. And that hope of the paradise is supposed to also help you when you're feeling low, because you are meant to dwell on the fact that very soon all evil will be gone, all wicked people will be gone, and you'll be left with only people who love Jehovah and are good, and you'll have no worries and live on this wonderful earth with peace and harmony. Yeah. So that leads me on to my final point and my final straw as to why I left the Jehovah's Witnesses. All of that being said that I've mentioned, all the points I've mentioned, as well as many other things that I can't go into because it's a bit too personal and it involves other people, which I wouldn't do that to anybody that I'm related to or anybody that's been involved in my life. You know, it's not fair to do that to any of them. But all of what I mentioned before came to a head at the end of 2018, December 2018, was the beginning of the end for me. My mental health was at an all-time low because of all the things I mentioned. I was feeling depressed, I was feeling not good enough. I'd been through some things in my personal life that had left me feeling really devastated. I got to the point where in December 2018, without getting my video taken down, you have to use certain words and be very careful what you say, I didn't want to be around anymore. I got to that point where I didn't want to be around anymore, and that frightened me. And I knew that something inside me had essentially, I don't know, I don't want to say died, but it did feel like something inside of me had gone. And from December 2018, as I said, that was the beginning of the end for me. And because I had lost the will to want to be around, I guess I stopped trying as hard, because up until that point I had essentially poured myself out. I felt like I had emptied myself of everything I had, trying my best to follow everything I had been told to follow. I essentially made one last ditch attempt to try, because nothing was working. The prayers weren't working, the extra Bible studying, and I was overwhelmed with everything. Everything was too much. So I then began missing the weekly meetings, some of the weekly meetings. I wasn't pushing myself to do the door knocking and the preaching as much as I was. Things just started to, I started to be a bit kinder to myself. I would, they had a provision at the time where if you weren't able to make it to the weekly meeting, you were allowed to phone in. Essentially, they had like a conference call type of thing where you could listen into the meeting by calling into this number, and they would connect you to the meeting, and I would listen to it that way. So I would, from the comfort of my bed, I'll be honest, from the comfort of my bed, I was able to listen in, and it was great because it was such a struggle to try and get my children to sit and behave for those 2 hours that you attended the meetings. Such a struggle for me. and it used to get me down so much that they wouldn't sit still. But they were children, they were kids, and it was a lot of the time they didn't, you know, understand what was going on. Forcing them to listen was just taking all the joy out of me. So when I was able to call in with the conference call thing, that was just such a relief. As I said, I could listen from the comfort of my bed, and I didn't have to make the children sit and listen, which again wasn't the right Christian thing to do. The right good Jehovah's Witness thing to do would be to make my children sit there with the phone and listen. But as I said, I'd got to the point where something inside me had gone, and I was hanging on by a thread. And it got to summer 2019 when they have their annual, what they call district convention, which is a massive big meeting of thousands of Jehovah's Witnesses. They usually hold it at, when I was younger, they used to hold it at Twickenham Rugby Stadium. And in later years, they would hold it at the O2 venue. O2? No, that's not correct. It was, Jesus, where was it now? Oh my God, it's gone clean out of my head. I'll put the name of it once I remember in the video, it'll be there. But they would gather there, thousands of them, and you'd have a 3-day convention starting generally around 9ish, ending round about 4, 5ish. So the whole day thing, very, very taxing, and again on your energy, especially when you have children, to try and make them sit there for all that time. You do obviously have a break where you have lunch for an hour or an hour and a bit, but again, it's a lot. It's a long day. It's a long day for an adult, let alone for children, and I dreaded it. The last couple of years prior to me leaving, I had dreaded it because it was such a big feat, and I would often try and enlist the help of my family to help me get through, you know, help me either go along with me, because my family weren't always assigned to the same venue as me because we were in different congregations. So oftentimes I would be on my own with the kids. Sometimes they go with their dad, or, you know, we try and share it because, you know, it's a lot. So we would try and share the childcare, but it's a lot. It was a lot. So in summer 2019, I had, I think, I did attend, didn't I? Yeah, I did. I actually did attend. I can't remember now, but yeah, I attended, and it was heartbreaking for me because I'd had, as I said, I was on and off with attending the weekly meetings. I wasn't attending as many as I used to, which was very new for me, because no matter how I was feeling, no matter how bad I felt, no matter how depressed I was trying to be a devout Christian the way that my mum was. My mum had set that example for me and my sister growing up, so I really tried my best to be exactly the same, no matter how I was feeling, to be at all the meetings and etc, etc. But because I'd been missing them, I said to myself, right, the 3-day convention's coming up, and it's something that a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses look forward to, because what they would say is that, you know, it's a time for you to get a real boost of spiritual encouragement, and, you know, you get to maybe meet up with friends that you haven't seen for a while. It's the one time of the year that, yeah, you kind of all get together, and it was a nice time. So I thought, okay, I haven't been attending the meetings for a good little while, or I'm quite irregular, as they would say. Haven't been out in the preaching work, etc, etc. The convention's coming up. I prayed that I would get some encouragement to give me that boost, that, like I said, what was missing within me. Please let it come back. Let it come back after this 3-day convention, which normally it did. Anytime I felt down, anytime I was feeling like I, you know, was a bit low spiritually, so to speak, I'd come back from those conventions and I would generally feel a bit more like enthused and a bit more built up to then continue on with that very active, very full-on schedule. And it got to the Sunday of that convention, because this, as I said, it's a 3-day thing, starting on Friday. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and I attended the all 3 days. Got to the Sunday, and I remember that I still felt nothing. There were some talks that were given that cognitively, yeah, were very nice to hear, but they hadn't touched my heart the way that they normally did. I didn't feel anything, and I definitely was not encouraged to continue doing what I was doing. In fact, it just made me feel even more down. I felt even more rubbish. I felt even more like I was not good enough. And I remember crying, because, side note, a lot of the JW, how do I put it? A lot of the JW talks that they give and video presentations that they show are very emotional, very, again, intended to hit your emotions. Yeah, not play on your emotions, but hit you emotionally. So on the Sunday, there's usually a very sort of, as I said, emotional, kind of heartfelt talk or video presentation given, and you feel, oh, very, very nice. But I was crying for a different reason. I was crying because I didn't feel anything, and I didn't understand why I still didn't feel anything. And then I just thought, maybe I'm just a lost cause. Maybe there's something wrong with me. And unfortunately, from then I missed even more meetings. And then it got to September 2019 when I remember saying like a final prayer to Jehovah and just saying, I give up. I can't do this anymore. I haven't attended any of the meetings. I'm not going out preaching. I can't do this. I accept my fate. That, as I mentioned before, Armageddon's going to come and I'm going to get destroyed. And at that point, I didn't even want the paradise. I didn't want to get into the paradise because I felt so rubbish about myself, and I felt that if I couldn't keep up with the schedule in this world before the paradise, and I couldn't find happiness in the things they were telling me I should find happiness in, then I didn't want to be part of the new world, the new paradise, because I still feel like, even though they said I'd be made perfect and everything would be perfect around me, I still felt like I wouldn't be able to do it. And I didn't want to live in a world where I felt I had to do these things, because at that point I now was only doing these things because I was told to. None of it was because I wanted to. I didn't want it anymore. I didn't want any of it. And I said to Jehovah God, yeah, I accept my fate, because I can't please you. I'm the most unhappy I've ever been. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to subject my children to this anymore. And yet I still tried one last time. I remember the last meeting I went to, again, end of September, went to my last meeting, and something was said in that meeting about if you're not doing enough preaching, then you're blood guilty. Which is a common thing that I'd heard throughout my whole life, that if you didn't go out and preach to people and tell people about Armageddon and teach people about Jehovah and tell them what was coming, then essentially you would be deemed as blood guilty. You would have that person's blood on your hands because you didn't go and do what you should have to warn them that very soon Armageddon's coming. They may get destroyed, or they will get destroyed if they don't try and become a Jehovah's Witness. And that was the final, that was it. I got up, the meeting hadn't finished. I got up and I left that Kingdom Hall knowing I would never, ever step foot in that one or any other Kingdom Hall again in my life. I knew it. And I said, they say never ever, but I knew I would never. I had no intention of ever going back. I said, well, that's it. I'm done. That was like almost the last, well, that was my final straw. Hearing those words, I said, right, I have to get out of here before my mental health is destroyed forever. And I remember getting in the car, driving home, and it felt like a humongous weight was lifted from my chest. I've never felt anything like that in my life. I finally felt free because I knew I was never going back. I knew that my life now was my own. I was free to do with my time whatever I wanted to. I was no longer under that, I don't want to use the word tyranny, but I was no longer under that regime. That's the only word I can think of right now. Might be, if I can think of a better word, I'll insert it, but I was just no longer part of it, and I felt free. I'd never known freedom like it in my life because I'd been under the Jehovah's Witness organisation since I was a toddler. It's all I've known. I was essentially like a born in, as they call them, born into the organisation. I hadn't known anything else. My whole life had been governed by governed and dictated by the Jehovah's Witnesses, and I was free. I was free. And I just remember, as I said, feeling a relief like I'd never known in my life before. And that was it for me. That is when I left the Jehovah's Witnesses, and that is why I left. Apologies that this has been quite a lengthy video, but I feel like it's important that I discussed it the way that I have, so that it's clear. It's a bit more clear. I did film another video, but it wasn't as clear as this one, and I feel like this explains a bit better without going into, and I haven't gone into everything, you know. I haven't listen, she hasn't gone into everything. As long as this video is, she hasn't gone into everything, because there's a whole heap more. But like I said, this isn't meant to be a bashing video towards them. This is just my experience and where I got to in the latter years of my life. And also what I struggled with, like I said, throughout my journey. If you have any questions though, feel free to email me or comment in the comments below. Let me know if you've had any experiences that are similar, if you're an ex-JW, or if anything I said resonates with you, let me know. And as I said, I will be doing much more videos. I post on Wednesdays and Sundays, like I said, and I will see you on my next video. Please like and subscribe. I should have said that as well. I don't know if I said that already, but please like, comment and subscribe. And I'll see you on my next video.